you. Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. Well, everybody, first of all, I want to say that I've actually been traveling and been speaking at a number of conferences, and it's really a great joy and a privilege for me to be able to be talking to you. They're going to fix the microphone because so that you can all hear. But your title of the conference for this year is the survival of the fittest. And I don't need to tell you that in this field, one of the most important ingredients to us is the issue of spirituality. Many of us who belong to 12-step programs or encourage our clients and patients to go to the 12-step program know that across the country and indeed across the world, the 12-step program is seen as being spiritual. Many treatment centers emphasize that an aspect of their treatment is spirituality. What I want us to be able to do this morning, and I'll be picking it up this afternoon when I deal with codependency and sexual abuse, as well as sexual addiction, is to really talk about what spirituality is, and also what it isn't. So I think we're going to be, hopefully, very excited and motivated. You will get this morning exactly what you want. In my experience, this subject can change our lives. And I don't need to emphasize that survival is going to depend upon our creativity and our energy, whether it's as therapists or whether it is as marketers. It's very important for us to not only make sure that we have good treatment for patients, and I'm, by the way, recovering alcoholic of 16 years. It's very important that we have good treatment, good therapists, but also that we can represent ourselves as energetically and as creatively as we possibly can. So we're in for something this morning. I was at the airport in Los Angeles getting ready for my trip, and I'm stood there with a little bag. Oh, you priests only need little bags. Underwear and a pair of shirts, you know, that's all we need, just a little bag. I'm stood there with my little bag. And you can tell at the airport when people are looking at you. This group of people kind of going like this, you know, looking. And one of these guys comes over to me, and I'm dressed like this, and he says to me at the airport, he says, are you a preacher? And I'm dressed like this. So I said to him, no, I wear these clothes in order to fly. He said, praise the Lord. He said it 3 times. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. This is in the airport. I looked at him straight in the eye. I said, praise yourself. Praise yourself. I said it 3 times. Praise yourself. He thought I was a New Age penguin. Now what I found out was he was from a Baptist convention. And I want to share with you something, and it's very important, not only for us, by the way, but also for our patients. Isn't it amazing how many people praise God, but they don't praise themselves? Isn't it amazing how many people say they love God, but they don't seem to love themselves? Isn't it amazing how many people say that God is powerful, and yet they're not aware of their own power? Now, I realize that not everybody here is Christian. In fact, my talk is about spirituality. It's not about a particular religion. And there are many, many people who are from other faiths in this field. Jewish people, Buddhists and Hindus, all over this country. But predominantly in this audience, you are Christian. The carpenter from Nazareth said something The carpenter from Nazareth said, greater things than I have done, you will do. Now, I don't know about you. I would have been happy if he'd have said, you're going to do things almost as good as me. I'd have said, hey, that ain't bad. That ain't bad. If he'd have even said, you're going to do things as good as me, I'd have said, wow, that's got to be a wow. That's got to be a wow. But he said, greater things than I have done, you will do. But you've got to believe in yourself. Now, spirituality is very much about that. How we convey ourselves, how we walk, how we talk. I used to say, and I still say it at the hospitals that I visit and consult at, if you say good morning to the doctor but you've forgotten to say good morning to the cleaner, you've missed it. You've missed it. Spirituality is about ordinary hellos and ordinary hugs. And the talk that I give to you today is going to be about how we can start to empower ourselves by knowledge. I told you, by the way, that I'm a recovering person. You've probably gathered by my accent that I'm not from Ohio. I'm from England. England. Long time ago, George Bernard Shaw said that America and England are two countries divided by a common language. Sometimes you'll say something that doesn't mean the same as me. Sometimes I'll say something that doesn't mean the same as you. Times it can be embarrassing. I had my mother, she's 81, and my father over from England. Both of them 81. Do you have a mother like my mother? My mother will ask a question. Then she answers her own question. Then she walks away mad. But as a special occasion, I decided to have the bishop, the Episcopal bishop, I'm Episcopalian, the Episcopal bishop and his wife for dinner. Now, my mother, she behaved all the way through the meal. Till the bishop was getting ready to go, and then she said, Bishop, it's been wonderful having you here for dinner. Now please go home and keep your pecker up. Now, I don't know whether you realize it, but in England, the pecker's the nose. It means hold your head up. I could tell by the expression on the bishop's face that pecker didn't mean the same. Bishop's wife was there to say, I wish you could. Every country has its famous drunks. You have Dean Martin. We had Winston Churchill. I don't know whether many of you know Winston used to drink about a bottle of brandy a day. Now, I don't know whether Winston was alcoholic or not, but there were some stories told about Winston that I can identify with. A lovely story. Winston was sitting at dinner with Lady Astor, and Lady Astor said to Winston Churchill, Winnie, you're drunk. Winston Churchill, in his inimitable way, said, Madam, you are ugly. But I shall wake up sober in the morning. Hey, she said, Winnie, if I was your wife, I'd put poison in your soup. Madam, if I was your husband, I'd drink it. Now, the reason I say this to you, and you know it, alcoholics lie and they manipulate, and our job is to confront. Our job is to persuade. In the 90s, you and I will be persuaders. Our effectiveness as a psychiatrist or therapist is how capable we are of persuading a person to change their mind, to change their attitude, to change their lifestyle. Knowledge alone won't do it. I was in Memphis, Alabama. Memphis. Is Memphis in Alabama? Memphis, Tennessee. I know it was Memphis. And I'm with the psychiatric hospital. I'm doing an in-service at the psychiatric hospital on depression. And the administrator says, I'll take you for lunch. I'm very happy. He's paying. And we're going along the corridor. And as we're going along the corridor, I see a lady in the corridor of the hospital walking against the wall. She's like this. When you walk like that, people notice you. And I said to the administrator, who's the woman walking against the wall? In Memphis. He said, she's a therapist. I said, what does she teach? He said, assertion. We got a problem. Now, you're not going to be surprised to know she's got 2 PhDs. She's writing a book. But can she take you where she herself has not been? We know about alcoholism and drug addiction, and some of us are learning about sexual addiction and eating disorders, depression. We know. Let me tell you this, you can also hide behind knowledge. Spirituality is about being a positive and a creative human being. No more and no less. Spirituality is about being a positive and a creative human being. Will you all say that with me? Spirituality is being a... Now say it with a little bit of enthusiasm, okay? Spirituality is being... Now that, the carpenter from Nazareth was positive and creative, greater things. There isn't any great spiritual leader from Mahatma Gandhi to the Buddha who wasn't talking about how to become positive and creative. The 12-step program is about changing a person's life from being negative and destructive to being positive and creative. That's the spiritual awakening. And our challenge, and God knows some of us because of what's going on in this insurance world, our challenge is to be doing that in fewer and fewer days. You know that, and I know that. The disease is laughing. Because when we used to have, as I did, and by the way, I had 3 months in treatment. 16 years ago when I went in my treatment for alcoholism, it was for 3 months. That's a quarter of a pregnancy. First month I was there, didn't know why I was there. Second month, I thought I was the chaplain. But during that 3 months, I learned how to turn my life around. We have to do it in precious few days. I hope you agree with me that spirituality is one of the most essential ingredients. And yet, it's sad to say, still it's not emphasized anywhere near enough. And one of the reasons is, and I think you're aware of it, those of you who are here, that sometimes spirituality gets confused with religion. Okay? I am not talking about religion. In fact, there was somebody who said it some years ago, ooh, and they said it and it struck at the core of me. They said religion is man-made, spirituality is God-given. Religion very often divides people up. I'm Baptist, I'm Catholic, I'm Episcopalian, I'm a Methodist. Spirituality teaches people to hold hands. In March of this year, I was in New Delhi, India, giving talks on spirituality to treatment centers in India and psychiatrists. Same 12-step program. I was the only Christian there sitting with Hindus and Muslims, but the same 12-step program. I've been to Arab countries, to Israel, to Thailand. It is amazing how this spiritual program unites us all. And yet still, so many people don't understand its power or its creativity. Now, I believe that the most important thing that you can do is to be the best you, the best human being that you can be. Since I came to this country in 1980, and in the writings of professional counselor that some of you may read, I have challenged this field to place spirituality at the center of their treatment, the center of their aftercare, the center of their marketing. Only then will we be able to bring about the changes and survive. Because it isn't just about technique and it isn't just about making money. It's about how we love a person enough to get them to start to love themselves. In a book that I wrote that will set the tone, wrote it called Spirituality and Recovery, I placed in this book the story of a man who died, but whose story still touches people today, and the movie on his life is being shown at the present time on TNT and Bravo. He lived in the 19th century. The movie was called The Elephant Man. His name was John Merrick. He had a disease, ladies and gentlemen, like my disease, only his was on the outside that made him have shame. People laughed at him and people ridiculed him because of his deformity, just like people laughed at me and ridiculed me because of my alcoholism. Well, we know how he lived. But how many of us remember how he died? Well, in the London Times, the doctor that treated him, Dr. Treve, wrote this. Some 6 months after John Merrick, the Elephant Man, returned from the country, he was found dead in bed. This was in April 1890. He was lying on his back as if asleep and had evidently died suddenly and without a struggle, since not even the coverlet of the bed was disturbed. The method of his death was very peculiar. So large and so heavy was his head that he could never sleep lying down. When he assumed the sleeping position, you see, his massive skull was inclined to drop backwards, with the result that he experienced a great deal of pain. The attitude that John Merrick was compelled to assume when he slept was very strange. He sat up in bed with his back supported by pillows. His knees had to be drawn up. His arms were clasped around his knees, and his head rested on the points of his bent knees. Every night he slept like that. Dr. Treve says he often said to me that he really wished he could just lie down like other people. I think on this last night he must, with some determination, have made the experiment. And the pillow was soft, and his head, when placed on it, must have fallen backwards and caused a dislocation of the neck. Thus it came about that John Merrick's death was due to a desire that had dominated his life. The pathetic and hopeless desire to be like other people. A lot of friends of mine have died trying to drink like other people. Some people suffer serious consequences because they try to eat like other people. Spirituality is about you being your own person. Every one of us in this room is unique. We are not the same. There is a reason why 12-step programs today and when they first started were anonymous. They were anonymous because of shame. And they were anonymous because of guilt. In 1993, still, the majority of alcoholics and drug addicts do not make that telephone call and do not get help. Shame. Churches today, thank the Lord, are supporting and getting more involved in this thing we call recovery. But 20, 30 years ago, all over the United States, there were some people that would prefer to die rather than admit that they have an alcohol problem. There are few diseases that have the shame and the guilt of alcoholism and drug addiction, and now some of the issues around sexual abuse and sexual addiction. Our job is not just to deal with the disease. Our job, and this makes it so difficult for us, is to deal with a climate of prejudice that stops people who could get well getting well. And I've always, in the 12 years that I've been speaking across the United States, talked about the distinction between spirituality and religion, and then platformed the power of what spirituality is. I still will do that today. In the overheads that I have, and I hope you're going to be able to see them clearly here, you will see that unhealthy religion is still a major problem. Unhealthy religion still can stop people getting well. Most of us, ladies and gentlemen, did not pick the religion of our birth. I was brought up in a Catholic home. I was going to be a Jesuit, and I left the Catholic Church because I disagreed on the issue of birth control. But most people tend to stay in the religion of their birth. In other words, if you were born in a Baptist family, you'd be Baptist. Born in a Catholic family, you'd be Catholic. The worst thing in the world, ladies and gentlemen, and next week I'm speaking to therapists and members of the FBI in Waco, Texas, next week. You will be able to understand why I'm so concerned about this, because still today there are some people who are trying to get well from addiction with religion rather than get some therapy and help. Some of the characteristics are, if you're told there's only one right way, and that's the way of the speaker, the way of the preacher, or the way of the priest. If you're brought up that you're not allowed to have a choice, and by the way, if you cannot have a choice and you cannot ask questions, let's call it what it is. You're a slave. If human beings can't ask questions and if human beings cannot make a choice around their lives, call it what it is. There's nothing wrong with rules, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, but there's something with rigid rules. Rigid rules are when you play God. And one of the great hallmarks of our tradition is to say, we're not God. To have a rigid rule is to have a rule that will not bend. And by the way, when we're talking about surviving for the future, many of us have to look at our styles of treatment. No longer do we just do business the same old way. 2 weeks ago I was in New Orleans fishing for bass. The fisherman I was with told me there's many, many, many ways to catch a fish. And there are many, many types of bait to be used. That's exactly the same when it comes to therapy. Ladies and gentlemen, I read my Bible every day. But I have met many, many people who can hide behind their Bible. and they can hide behind their biblical text. You know, it's often said the devil can quote Scripture. It isn't a case of knowing the book, it's living it. That's why this concept of spirituality is so important. Funny little story of what do you get if you mix a Jehovah's Witness with an agnostic. Somebody knocking at your door, but they don't know why. And you're not going to be surprised when you hear me say to you that I've been involved in numerous sexual abuse cases, and by the way, it's very sad when somebody has been sexually abused by a priest or a minister or an organist or a Sunday school teacher, and one person with tears in their eyes said it so well. They said, Father Leo, it's like God was the perpetrator. Now, I don't need to tell you, those of you who deal with sexual addiction, and I know many of you do, and many of you are working with sexual abuse, the unhealthy syndrome of when you are a perpetrator, then running to religion, and then that vicious cycle. Because in some of the more rigid churches, you find some of the people who have such an unhealthy and dysfunctional sexuality. About a month ago, I was taping, and it's going to be shown, I think, this month, the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oprah Winfrey, I've been on a show 3 times, and Oprah Winfrey is somebody who I've got to know reasonably well, and she said she never until recently connected her compulsive eating with the sexual abuse she undergone. She was one of the first major speakers, to her credit, who spoke about sexual abuse from her cousins. What she's now realizing is her rigid religious background and the shame connected with sex, let alone sexual abuse, stopped her talking about the sexual abuse. Especially here in Texas, especially in places where there is this description called the Bible Belt. We need to understand that some messages we received were indeed unhealthy. Not only from our parents, but from our churches. Those of you who are interested in codependency, and I'll talk about it more this afternoon when I do the workshop. You finish the saying for me. You finish this saying for me, but you'll see the setup. If you can't say anything good, we were almost set up to be people pleasers. And I wonder how many Christians like me were told by their grandmother, a good Christian doesn't get angry. And now more therapists are saying you need to get in touch with your anger. Especially with eating disorders, because it's not what you're eating, it's what's been eating you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you put a minister and an authority figure on a pedestal, where are you? If you put somebody up here, where are you? And so often we realize that rape, incest, sexual abuse is not just a sex issue, but a power issue. If you place a person above you, and you think that person just speaks for God, you can set yourself up and your children for all manner of abuse. When I go to Waco, Texas next week, be under no mistake, one of the issues that was there wasn't just religious abuse, but sexual abuse. Mothers gave their children to this David Koresh to sleep with. Ladies and gentlemen, the dogma and the ritual. How many of you therapists, I wonder, have had to gently try to coax a patient from the fact that holding a Bible or bringing a crucifix into treatment or going to Mass doesn't get you well? You had the crucifix, the Bible, and the Mass when you were still drinking. Scott Peck did it so well in his book, The Road Less Traveled. You keep doing the same things, you'll keep getting the same results. Nothing could be better in this conference theme of change. The times are changing. And more we're looking at the abuse that has gone on in the name of God. And those therapists and psychologists and treatment centers and agencies that deal with guilt and shame, when you have to deal with a person sometimes for weeks and months to share the pain, the secret, I wonder what was it that made a person hate themselves so much. Well, in the book that one of your local people, John Bradshaw, did the introduction for me, this is one of the first books that dealt with sexual abuse and religion, addictive religion and religious abuse. I titled it, When God Becomes a Drug. When you use religion as an escape from the real life. And I platformed the chapter on sin, shame, fear, and guilt with a letter that was written to me by a lady from Louisiana. Maybe some of you in this room can identify with this, or maybe you know patients who can identify with it. This is what she wrote. Father Leo, I hate God, and yet I also love God. When I hear you talk about God being loving, forgiving, nurturing, and involved in my life, Father Leo, it bears no resemblance to what I was taught as a child growing up. The first words I remember as a child from my preacher was, God's going to get you. And it went downhill from there. God was to be feared. An angry and punishing God. A God who could punish you and your family with sickness and unemployment if you broke the rules. My childhood God was against laughter, dancing, makeup, and fun. Oh, Father Leo, a part of me loves God, and yet a part of me hates God. You and I know it's not God she hates. But there are people who in the name of God can hurt you so much. Now we compare this with healthy spirituality. And I believe that every treatment center here, every treatment center and every therapist does not have a mandate to convert people to their religion, but to teach people how to love. To encourage people to be positive and creative and to be empowered. You have to make choices, you have to make decisions, and you bet you're going to have to initiate and build healthy boundaries. Power. One of the great things about recovery is you have a choice. A choice around how you live, a choice around where you go, and a choice around the friends that you keep. And when the 12-step program over 50-odd years ago said a God as you understand God, that was powerful. When you think that over 50 years ago, men sat down and wrote down and said, you need to find a God as you understand God. The miracle of that 12-step approach. Not a God of a pope, not a God of a preacher, not a God of a minister. A God as you understand God. And many of us are treading our own spiritual journeys. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to ask questions. One of the most important things in order for our minds to develop and to grow is to put your hand up and ask a question. I don't understand this, or I don't necessarily believe this. And that's how we grow. We do it in treatment centers. Wouldn't it be sad if you had a sponsor and the sponsor never let you ask a question? Wouldn't it be sad that if you had a treatment center and the treatment center never allowed you to think? Well, I believe that the spiritual message is one of freedom, not of oppression. You look around this room like I look around this room and you'll see difference. Different cultures, different colors, different gifts, different families, different traditions. Oh, God has created us in diversity. We're not the same. And the one thing that recovery emphasizes more than anything else is that this diversity makes us strong, and it's so important for people in treatment to discuss and network with each other. It's so important for us not just to hang around with the people we came with, but get to know those doctors and psychiatrists and therapists and agencies that deal with different subjects. Networking is an important aspect of spirituality. Because if you can find a good therapist who deals with incest, and incest has other issues besides sexual abuse, if you can find a good therapist who deals with incest, that can be terribly important for your clients and maybe for yourself. Sometimes there's such a richness in this room and we don't always know where it is. You heard when Matt introduced me, I have a church in Hawthorne, Los Angeles. I will be there tomorrow, and the Archdeacon is coming from the Bishop's office, and we're having a special brunch tomorrow. But I believe that God has given us a power within ourselves. The real miracle is within. And you, as therapists and as counselors, in many cases, are getting a patient and a client to reach within themselves for the answer, not look for a fix outside. I was drinking as a priest. When I was drinking as a priest, my mother, she went to church every day. She tells me today that she lit candles to the Virgin Mary every morning when I was drinking. She lit that many candles, it was like a bonfire. The plastic Virgin Mary was doing this when she lit the candles. If it had been in Portugal, it would have been a miracle. She spoke to the Virgin Mary every day, but guess who she didn't speak to? Me. I wonder how many people tomorrow will be praying for their son or their daughter or their husband. I wonder how many battered women will be asking Jesus to help them, and they've been asking Jesus for the last 10 years to help them. I wonder how many young girls and boys cried to God to help when they were being sexually abused, looking to God to fix you. The help's in this room. If ever there was a challenge to a hurting nation, it's in this room. Our job is to get the message out. That's why we call it 12 steps. 12 steps. Not 12 stand stills. 12 steps. We take steps and we move. If my understanding is right, step means to move. It's an action. Once you come in this program, you never stop moving and you never stop growing, and there's never a time you've reached the end. Steps. When I said for the very first time, my name's Leo and I'm an alcoholic, acceptance started to come into my life. Until you can accept who you are and where you come from, how can you ever grow? Denial is when you don't accept. Denial is when you turn your head from what you know to be true. We are persuaders. I bet you are some of the best people in this area to sit with an older lady and say, Mary, you've got to face what's going on. And she will say to you, and I'm sure in some cases there are tears in those eyes and you can see them now. And she will turn to you and she'll say, but it's so hard. It's so hard. And you will say to her, it's harder if you don't. Whenever I meet someone who says to me, it's hard to get well, I always say, it's harder not to. We are persuaders. And that power that I talk about of spirituality enables us to persuade. Hey, the drug pushers know how to do it. Wouldn't it be sad if the drug pushers have better marketing than we do? Wouldn't it be sad if the drug pushers have got more energy than we have? Wouldn't that be sad? Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of power and there's a lot of knowledge in this room. We've got to start using it. And have you ever thought an adult relationship with God? Those of you who read Professional Counselor, which is a magazine for therapists, know that I have a spirituality column. I've had it, I think I'm the longest contributor to Professional Counselor. Been doing it probably for 6 years. One of my recent articles was the thing called to put down, set aside the teddy bear. Like many of you, I'm a great believer in getting in touch with your inner child. Like many of you, I think it's very important for a person to have a stuffed toy to hold and to love and to befriend. Like many of you, I think that our childhood that was missed needs to be re-experienced. But I do believe that recovery is not about having a relationship with a stuffed toy. Recovery is about a relationship with ourselves and with another person. And when it comes to God, we all say we're a child of God. You're right. But there's nothing wrong with the child growing up. When the child starts to think, when the child starts to discuss, when the child starts to grow, there's nothing wrong with being an adult. And I can tell you, and I'm 47 years old, I'm an adult who can play. I'm an adult who enjoys playing. Adults can have fun too. So I believe that one of the most important things in our spiritual growth is to have an adult relationship with God instead of a childish dependence. All of this is going to take time, but it needs to begin right away. Martin Luther King, in one of his talks, said something that many people forget. He said in Alabama once, you need not only pray, you need to be prepared to march. He knew, like we know, that it's not enough just to pray. You also have to be prepared to march for the things that you believe in. Those of us in this treatment field know, because we say what he said in a different way. We say, put your body where your mouth is. To talk the talk is one thing. To walk it is another. Now let's have a look and see what we actually deal with here. What we deal with are these issues. We started with alcoholism, but we're moving now to look at alcoholism that can be abusive, and also drugs, and yes, food. More and more, many of us who are in this room work for psychiatric hospitals and psychiatrists, as well as just for substance and alcohol abuse programs. Depression, very often, which is the diagnosis, has these symptoms. And there are many people who are alcoholic who constantly abuse alcohol or drugs or, yes, food. And that beautiful short saying has touched so many of us. It's not what you're eating. It's what's eating you. And our job is somehow or other to get within and behind the denial and the barrier that stops a person sharing what's really going on. Exercise addiction, in other words, people who are obsessed with exercise and working out. You know as well as I do, it's another form of bulimia. Those of you in this room who still smoke wouldn't want any of your children or grandchildren to smoke. The fact that you're smoking today is part of an age where smoking was perfectly acceptable, but I don't think there's anybody in this room who would want their child or their grandchild to smoke. Nicotine is an addiction. And I don't think there's as much denial about it, because, as I've said, even the smokers in this room would accept that it is an addiction. That's why it's so hard to stop. The smoking of marijuana is also the same. Incidentally, I'm almost a pure alcoholic. I only ever smoked marijuana twice.
But you didn't inhale.
No. Not said I didn't inhale. No, what happened was, the first time I smoked marijuana, I got an erection. The second time, I got a headache. If it had been the other way around, I might have continued to use it. Codependency is what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon. And I'll tell you basically a definition of codependency that I give. And that is, codependency is when you give your power away. Codependency is when you give your power away either by trying to control other people all the time, and they are control freaks, or people who are always passive and people-pleasing. The enemy of spirituality is codependency, because you keep missing yourself. Isn't it interesting that carpenter from Nazareth said, love God and your neighbor as yourself? It was always there. That's not made up. It was always there. Love God and your neighbor as yourself. Many of us have done a real good job of loving our families, our children, our neighbors, even our employers. But we've not done a great job of loving ourselves. Love your neighbor as yourself. So I'll talk more about codependency this afternoon. And here's a very serious one. Not just sexual abuse. In one sense, It's easier to talk about sexual abuse than it is about sexual addiction. As I go across the country, there is a lot more outpouring of sympathy, as it should be, for those who have been abused sexually, and very few treatment programs for perpetrators. And yet, as you think about it here today, there's probably as many perpetrators as there are people who've been abused. Now you ask yourself, why is it that people with sexual abuse and sexual addiction problems have such a hard time talking about it? If it's hard for an alcoholic and drug addict to talk about it, why is it so hard, as it is, for a sex addict and person who is sexually abused to talk about it? Ladies and gentlemen, because in our homes and in our churches and until recently in our schools, sex was not talked about. There is still many people who come up to me and say, in my home, we couldn't talk about it. And you know, because you hear psychiatrists talk about it, the shame that my mother had around sex was passed on to me. The shame that my family had around sex, not talking about it, switching the TV off, the shame that they have has been passed on by me, just by me and me being in the proximity of the family. Religiously, most of us got the message that sex was best only for having children and not to be talked about. There is a sense of sin and dirtiness around sex. And it's very interesting for some of us to pursue it, but the bottom line is that's why people who are very intelligent professional people, successful in many areas of their lives, never talk about their sexual abuse until very recently. Oprah Winfrey is just one example. An amazingly powerful and successful person who only until recently has talked about the abuse. And she'll tell you why. Because she blamed herself. She felt she was dirty. It was not okay to talk about. You and I are involved in healing. You read the Velveteen Rabbit. It's about being real. In the name of God, some people have been shamed. And when we talk about sex addiction and sexual abuse, you cannot talk about sexual addiction and bring healing, or sexual abuse and bring healing, until you deal with the religious abuse. And I have not met all the therapists in this room, but I bet you this, those of you who deal with sexual addiction, those of you who have sexual addicts as clients or members of your hospital, know that many of them are very religious. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about gambling, we're seeing far more gambling abuse as the casinos rise. And I do not want to get into the political debate about casinos or gambling. All I will tell you is there are many people who believe that money is power. And if power is indeed the goal of most addiction, then getting money and gambling for money and spending money to get money is going to be very abusive and for many people very obsessive and compulsive. When I have spoken and I've been invited to speak at Gambling Anonymous open meetings, I've seen the same pain, the same hurt, the same denial in those meetings as I've ever seen in any alcoholic or drug addicted meeting. And of course, closely connected with that, and many of you in this room may be able to identify with it, is credit card and shopping abuse. And for many of us, we smile until we live with somebody or have a son or daughter who has the problem. In Los Angeles, my staff, because I have a spirituality recovery meeting once a month, and I've been doing it for years, and I give a lecture at that meeting on a topic of addiction. And my staff said, Leo, give a meeting on credit card addiction, shopping addiction. I said, are you sure? Please. The place was crowded. I gave this lecture on shopping addiction and credit card addiction. I've never sold as many books or tapes as I did after that meeting. People were standing in a line saying, 5 books, 4 tapes, 3 videos. And this comes close to home for us, ladies and gentlemen. Those of us who work and work and work. It's interesting that the program says stop and smell the roses. And the program was very wise when it gave us that anagram, halt. Don't get too hungry. Don't get too angry. Don't get too lonely. And you got it. Don't get too tired. Some of you may be interested in this afterwards, because sometimes you can go to a conference that's dealing with obsessive and compulsive behavior, and you look at the schedule of events that start at 7 and end at 9, and you suddenly realize that you're getting compulsively trying to do everything. Well, for the last 5 years, for those therapists and people who are interested in spirituality, I've decided to, the last 5 years I've done what's called a conference cruise. And we've gone to Mexico. We went to Mexico this year. Next year, in March, we always go in March. In March of '94, we're going to the Caribbean. And I do it with Dr. Gail Vaughan, who is a psychologist who works with sexual abuse and with feelings and guilt and shame. But we always, on the conference cruise, spend time to snorkel and to sunbathe, to dance, to enjoy ourselves with each other, and it's a 7-day cruise. Those of you who may be interested, by the way, I do have some brochures on that, because some of you like to be involved in spirituality events and conferences, and we give 20 hours of education units if you need them. But the main thing is that my point with spirituality is it isn't just about working. It's about relaxing. So if those of you want some information on the cruise, I have some flyers up at the front. But work addiction, I've always in my life, and I travel and I give talks, but I'll tell you, I take 3-4 vacations a year, because I can be on the road for something like, in any 1 year, 7 months a year. So you need to stop and smell the roses, and you need to take care of yourself. And last but not least, and I do not want any of you in this room to miss it, and by the way, I am talking about unhealthy religion. I am not a critic of religion. Some of you in this room have friends who can drink. We're not against drinking, we're against abuse. Some of us in this room, like myself, can eat cake and pie and all those things. Some people cannot. We're not against eating, we're against abusive eating. Those of us who are concerned for sexual addiction, we're not against sex, we're against sexual abuse. And when you see religion, you must understand that what I'm talking about is obsessive and compulsive religion that divides families and separates families. Just for you to see just some of what those characteristics are, I'll go into more detail in the workshop, but there they are. If you in your community got the message, not that you make mistakes, but that you are the mistake, that's serious. We all understand there's a thing called sin, but there's also a thing called joy and happiness and fun. You come to this conference, and when you see Mary and you see Matt, you see people who can love and can hug and can smile. You can have fun. If this is a family of therapists, a family of those who are involved in alcohol and drug treatment, you want fun, not just work, fun, as you do in your family. Why is it that so many churches don't teach that fun? If you were brought up with rigid or dogmatic thinking, at least know it. I can tell you as a Catholic growing up, I wasn't allowed to go in any church that wasn't Catholic. And if I went into another church, by mistake, it was a sin. And I confessed it alongside with many of my family for going in a Protestant church. Now, if you listen to some friends of mine who are Baptist or Protestant, they had also critical views about Catholics. In fact, sometimes, even though you were still Christians, you couldn't marry somebody who was a Catholic. Or Catholics certainly would go to war if you wanted to marry a Protestant. How in the name of God people have been divided. There are many prejudices in this world, ladies and gentlemen. And if you've got a father or mother or grandparent or you yourself have an attitude of my way is the only way, let me tell you something, you've become God. Because I don't think if you check yourself out, I bet you any money in the last 5 years, every one of us has changed our minds on some things. You show me a man who won't change his mind, and I'll show you a man who's stunted in his own sickness. The obsessive aspects around quoting scripture that I've already referred to, and this is very important for us. I'll just put it up for people at the back. And that is, if you were brought up to think that sex was dirty, we are not helping any young girl growing up by keep referring to menstruation as the curse. It's very hard to give a message of self-esteem if every month you're zapped with a curse. We have to look very carefully at what messages we give and ask ourselves, do we really believe that every woman who menstruates is being cursed with the sin of Eve? By the way, when I was growing up, we were told that if you masturbate, the boys were told if you masturbate, you get hair all over your hands. And then some of the teachers said if you masturbate a lot, you go blind. And all the teachers wore spectacles. Hey, and here's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is when you don't believe in God, you believe in Santa Claus. God wants every alcoholic well, but do you want to get well? God wants every battered woman healed, but we have to go about creating that change. You'll be surprised. Tomorrow, in churches all over Texas, people are asking God to do what they should be doing themselves. So, ladies and gentlemen, we move to what recovery really is. You are looking at a priest who is absolutely committed to the work of therapy. I am a therapist. I belong to the counselors of CAC of California, and I'm on the board of the Eating Disorders Association of America. I believe that spirituality is not something that belongs to churches and priests or ministers. You are a spiritual instrument as any priest or preacher. You are the healers alongside of me. And I believe that therapy and treatment is an important aspect as long as the spirituality component is there and clear. And those of you who are connected with marketing treatment centers need to look very closely at how powerful spirituality is in addressing the issue of therapy and recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to develop an acceptance of ourselves as well as others. I constantly come back to it. Love God. Oh, but love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love yourself, you have no self-esteem. And by the way, if you have no self-esteem, how can you speak? How can you lecture? How can you do good groups? How can you go and represent at an EAP? When I was at Oxford in England, I heard a preacher in Washington, D.C. say, I have a dream. He got my attention. I have a dream, he said. He got my... And all the students in Oxford were like this, because we didn't know anything about this man or the civil rights, but we were listening. On a black and white TV, a man in Washington, D.C. got the attention of the nation. I have a dream. He used his voice, self-esteem. Do you think it would have worked if he'd have got to that microphone and said, I have a dream? I have a dream that one day black and white people go to the mountaintop. I have a dream. People would say, will you shut up, Martin? Will you just shut up? But he didn't. He said, I have a dream. And I'll tell you something, I've been in treatment centers and I've seen counselors and therapists give great lectures, but they can't deliver it. So the patients go out and smoke a cigarette, go to the toilet. Say this with me. Say this with me. Boring treatment is no treatment.
Boring treatment is no treatment.
Yeah. Well, when you go back, okay, and when you start to look at your program, ask yourself one question. Is it boring? And don't think of yourselves, think of the patients. Our job, if we believe that recovery is exciting, and my God, spirituality is exciting, then our program should be exciting. Affirmations, you bet. The affirmations that I use in my life is I'm a positive and creative person, I'm capable of change. The affirmations that I put out in my life are that I'm a powerful adult child of God. I believe in ongoing therapy and support. An outpatient should be, because many of us are having to develop outpatient programs, how we market and how we put the spiritual component in outpatient is as important today as it is in inpatient. Many of us need to learn new techniques of being able to lecture and also to give and do groups. You talk about survival of the fittest. Things have changed. Now there's two ways of going. One is to complain, I don't like these changes. It's not fair. Not like it used to be. It's not like it used to be. We know that. We all know that. No, but we're not going to go back. What we have to do is say, okay, this is what we've got. Let's go reality. Let's make it exciting, and let's make it work. And let's turn this damn thing on its head. Not keep complaining. Not like it used to be. And I'll tell you this, one of the godsends not only to us, but to the United States. I would say one of the godsends to the world is this 12-step program. I've said on television, and I've said it certainly in every church that I've ever gone to, if only the world could be introduced to a 12-step program, it would be a more loving and a more peaceful place to live in. But unfortunately, we are the ones who carry the message. I refer to the fact that I do a recovery service. I want you to see that I put my body where my mouth is. The spirituality service that we have once a month with Jerry Florence. Jerry Florence has done a lot of musical work with adult children, ACAs. This is where we have Jewish, Catholic, Protestants, Catholic priests, nuns, ministers and pastors attending. It is not any one denomination, it's a spirituality service. And the theme is empowerment. And in the theme, what I try to do is to emphasize our role in recovery. This is a prayer that I wrote. I wrote this prayer reflecting our belief in God, but also claiming our power as spiritual human beings. Truly, I believe we are responsible. You will see in this prayer the philosophy that I gave this morning is here in the text. Notice also I have been respectful of inclusive language, and it does not change the spiritual message. We need to start to create prayers that empower, not disempower. If you say that prayer with me, I think you will feel the force of what it is. Oh God, you have given me the power
to turn my life. May I remember to include myself in my event. May I never be afraid to reveal my anger or concern to those who have abused me. May I know that I never love you or others fully and help me until I begin to love myself. With you as my partner and co-creator, I am discovering all that is lovable and powerful within me. Thank you for guiding me as I present myself.
in so many ways. We have to be allowed to express our anger to those who have hurt and those who have abused us. Like you, I believe that God is all forgiving. But I'm not sure that somebody who was brutally raped or sexually abused has to forgive the abuser before they can get well. Now, many who have been hurt and abused reach a point whereby they can forgive the abuser. And that is wonderful to behold. But to give a message that in order for you to get well, you must forgive the person who hurt and abused you, for some people, is just too much. God is all forgiving. That we all believe. But we are not God. And in this prayer, I've suggested that one of the most spiritual things you can do is to reclaim yourself. Now, there's a lot of people who are here, and I hope that the networking that goes on, I will be going into the room and sign any books that you may want. I'll give it, yeah, if you want to, you can, I'm going to give you a number where you can get it. But one of the things I want you to be able to do, this is where you can get in touch with me. If you want the religious abuse support group, we send it to you. I have enough of them, I can send them to you. And information on the religious abuse. If you want the prayers, I've got other prayers besides this one, and I'll give some of them, show you some of them at the workshop. But remember to network. I do not have anywhere near enough cards for the people who are here, but in the workshop I have cards for the people who come. But I also would very much appreciate your cards. The purpose of this conference is for us to network with each other. In order for us to be able to stay in touch with one another, and what we're all doing requires an effort on our parts. Any of you who want the cruise information or any newsletter information, it's up here. And there's also some on the booth. I want to end my message to you by saying this, that in a program of recovery, spirituality teaches three things. We will love ourselves and love others in a way we never thought. We will begin to live and live an exciting life in a way that we've never thought. And last, and this is certainly not least, in our recovery and with spirituality, we will be able to laugh again and laugh at ourselves in a way that we've never ever thought. I want to thank all of you for listening to me, and I look forward to seeing many of you this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.